Amara had always been known for her gentle heart. She grew up in Ibadan, where neighbors spoke kindly of her soft voice and helping hands. But in her own family, especially around her elder sister Chinwe, kindness was never enough. Chinwe had a sharp tongue, and she used it often. At every family gathering, she found a way to make Amara the target. Sometimes it was a careless laugh about her plain clothes, other times a cutting remark about her quiet nature. But the cruelest comments were always about her looks. Chinwe loved to remind Amara, with a smirk, that no man would ever want her. At the dinner table, in the middle of conversations, even when relatives tried to change the subject, Chinwe would not stop. "Ah, Amara," she would say with mocking laughter, "by the time you marry, our children will already have grandchildren." The relatives would shift uncomfortably, but no one dared challenge Chinwe. Amara would lower her head, swallowing the sting, her smile forced but trembling at the edges. Then came the night no one forgot. The family was gathered under the warm yellow light of their uncle's sitting room. Laughter filled the air until Chinwe's voice sliced through it. She turned to Amara and said clearly, without shame, "You'll never be a bride." The words hung heavy, silencing the room. Amara's chest tightened, but she refused to cry where everyone could see. She looked down, her hands gripping her dress, and in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. One day, she would prove her sister wrong. Amara carried her sister's words like hidden scars. On the outside, she moved quietly through life, helping her mother in the kitchen, smiling politely at neighbors, keeping her head down. But inside, her heart was heavy. Every cruel remark Chinwe had thrown at her seemed to echo whenever she looked in the mirror. She didn't need anyone to remind her. Her own thoughts whispered it back to her. Maybe she really wasn't enough. The truth was, Chinwe had always overshadowed her, even as children. Amara remembered their school days, walking home together in their faded uniform. Chinwe's friends would surround her, laughing and chattering, while Amara trailed a few steps behind unnoticed. If Amara tried to join the group, Chinwe would make a joke at her expense, and the others would laugh harder. Many times, a friend Amara had tried to make would slowly drift toward Chinwe instead, caught in her louder, more confident glow. Amara would be left alone, clutching her schoolbooks tightly against her chest, wondering why she was never chosen. At home, it wasn't much different. When visitors came, Chinwe's beauty and wit earned her endless compliment. "Ah, this one will bring wealth to the family," the aunties would say, pinching Chinwe's cheeks and predicting a bright future. Amara would stand nearby, smiling faintly, waiting for someone to notice her too. But the praise rarely came. If it did, it was only about how helpful she was in the kitchen, how quiet she was compared to her lively sister. The words were meant kindly, but to Amara they felt like confirmation that she was invisible. Over the years, these small wounds piled up. She began to shrink into herself, avoiding mirrors, avoiding attention, believing deep down that love was something meant for others, never for her. When Chinwe repeated, "No man will ever marry you," Amara didn't just hear it, she believed it. The voice of doubt became her constant companion, whispering even when Chinwe wasn't around. But somewhere in that quiet heart, a flicker of resistance lived. Though small, it refused to die. Sometimes, when Amara was alone washing dishes, she would look at her reflection in the water and think, what if they are wrong? When she helped a neighbor's child with homework or stayed late to comfort a crying cousin, she felt a strength Chinwe never had, patience, kindness, and a steady love that asked for nothing in return. That spark gave her hope, even if she couldn't explain it. She couldn't erase the wounds, but she could choose not to let them define her completely. Amara didn't know how or when, but deep inside she began to believe that one day, her quiet strength would be seen, and her sister's cruel words would lose their power. Amara never expected her life to change in a small catering shop tucked away on a busy street in Ibadan. She worked there quietly, preparing trays of meat pies, arranging puff-puff, and serving drinks with a gentle smile. Customers often overlooked her, focusing only on the food or rushing out without a word of thanks. She didn't mind. She was used to being invisible. But one afternoon, a man walked in who noticed her in a way no one else ever had. His name was Obinna. He wasn't flashy like the men Chinwe always chased, the kind who wore gold chains and spoke loudly about money. Obinna was calm, with kind eyes that softened when he smiled. He ordered a plate of jollof rice, and when Amara handed it to him, he looked straight at her and said, "Thank you. You serve with such care." The words were simple, but to Amara they felt new, almost strange. She nodded shyly, her cheeks warming, and quickly turned away. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Sometimes he ordered food, other times just a drink, but always he lingered to ask Amara how her day was going. At first, she kept her answers short, afraid to say too much. But slowly, his gentle questions opened her up. She found herself laughing softly at his little jokes, listening to his stories about his work as a carpenter, and realizing how much she looked forward to his visits. Unlike others, Obinna seemed to see beyond her quietness. He noticed the way she paid attention to detail, the way she always made sure everyone was served before sitting down herself, the way she carried herself with dignity, even when people ignored her. To him, these weren't signs of weakness but of strength. One afternoon, when she apologized for not being as lively as other girls, Obinna shook his head and said, "Don't compare yourself. The world needs hearts like yours." His words stayed with her long after he left. Still, Amara kept their growing friendship a secret. She could already hear Chinyu's mocking laughter if she ever found out. Chinwe, meanwhile, was busy parading around with wealthy men, dressing in bright clothes, and bragging about gifts she received. She never noticed the quiet glow that had begun to spread across Amara's face whenever Obinna's name came up in her thoughts. In the evenings, when Amara walked home from the shop, she would think about Obinna's smile and the way he listened to her like she mattered. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not for her looks, not for her silence, but for her heart. And though doubt still whispered in her ear, there was also a new voice, gentle but steady, telling her that maybe she was worthy of love after all. The friendship between Amara and Obinna grew quietly, like a seed pushing through the soil without anyone noticing. He still came to the catering shop almost every day, and with time, their conversations stretched longer. Amara began to laugh more freely, though she often caught herself and quickly grew shy again. Deep down, she cared for him, but her sister's voice always returned to her mind like a sharp echo. "No man will ever want you. You'll never be a bride." Those words lived inside her like a shadow. One cool evening, after the shop had closed, Obinna offered to walk her home. The street was calm, the air carrying the smell of roasted corn from a nearby stall. They walked side by side, Amara clutching her bag tightly, her heart thumping in a way she didn't understand. Obinna was unusually quiet, as though gathering courage. Then, just before they reached her gate, he stopped. His voice was steady but gentle as he said, "Amara, I need to tell you something. I care about you, more than just as a friend." The world seemed to pause. Amara's breath caught in her chest. Her first instinct was fear. She shook her head quickly, eyes lowered. "No, Obinna, you don't mean that. My sister says I'm not. I'm not someone any man would choose." Her words trembled, her shame spilling out before she could stop it. Obinna looked at her with a seriousness she had never seen before. He stepped closer and spoke slowly, as if he wanted each word to sink into her heart. "I don't see what your sister sees. I see my future bride." Amara froze. The words felt almost too heavy, too beautiful to be real. Her eyes filled with tears, not of pain but of something new, hope. She had spent so long believing she was unworthy that she didn't know how to accept this kind of love. She wanted to believe him, but the battle inside her was fierce. "But what if I'm not enough?" she whispered. Obinna reached out and gently took her hand. "You are enough, Amara. You've always been enough. Your kindness, your heart, your strength, I see all of it. And that is what I want. Not the show your sister chases, not wealth or pride. I want you." In that moment, something shifted inside Amara. It was as if a crack opened in the wall she had built around herself for years. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where she was not defined by Chinyu's cruel words but by her own worth. She didn't answer right away, but when she finally looked up at Obinna, there was a softness in her eyes that had never been there before. That night, lying awake in her room, Amara replayed his words over and over. "I see my future bride." For the first time, she let herself dream of walking down the aisle, not as the invisible sister, but as a woman who was deeply loved. When Chinwe finally discovered that Amara was seeing Obinna, she reacted exactly as Amara had feared. The news didn't reach her gently, it exploded like fire. One afternoon, she cornered Amara in their mother's kitchen after overhearing neighbors whispering about how often Obinna visited the catering shop. Chinwe's laugh was sharp and cruel. "You? With a man? Don't make me laugh, Amara. Obinna must be pitying you. That's the only reason he's hanging around." Her words stung, but Chinwe didn't stop there. She mocked Amara mercilessly at every chance she got. At family gatherings, she teased loudly, making jokes about how Obinna would soon wake up from his mistake. In front of relatives, she smirked and said, "Don't worry, everyone. When Obinna sees who Amara really is, he'll come running to me." Each word cut deep, reopening wounds Amara had tried to heal. But Chinyu's jealousy didn't stop at mocking. In her mind, it was impossible for any man to choose Amara over her. So one evening, when she knew Obinna was helping Amara carry supplies back to the shop, Chinwe waited until Amara was out of sight. She approached Obinna, dressed in her finest blouse, her perfume strong in the air. With a sly smile, she leaned closer and whispered, "Obinna, you don't have to pretend. I know I'm the one you truly want. Everyone does. Amara can never give you what I can." Obinna stepped back immediately, his face tightening with anger. "Respect yourself, Chinwe," he said firmly. "I love your sister. She is the woman I choose, not you." His voice was steady, leaving no room for doubt. Chinwe blinked, stunned that her charm had failed. Men usually bent to her beauty, yet here Obinna stood, unmoved and loyal to the very sister she had always belittled. For the first time, Chinwe felt something she rarely experienced: rejection. It burned hotter than her pride could handle. Her face hardened, and she spat out bitterly, "We'll see how long that lasts. Amara doesn't deserve happiness. I'll make sure this so-called love doesn't last." From that day, Chinwe's mocking grew sharper, her bitterness sharper still. She carried her humiliation like a hidden wound, determined to strike back. Amara, though shaken when she heard whispers of what her sister had tried, found strength in Obinna's loyalty. His rejection of Chinwe's advances was proof that his love was real, stronger than her sister's cruelty. But Chinwe was not finished. Behind her fake smiles, she was plotting, her jealousy feeding her every thought. She vowed she would ruin their union, no matter what it took. And though Amara tried to ignore the storm gathering in her sister's heart, deep down she knew the battle was only just beginning. When Amara and Obinna finally announced their engagement, it felt like the sun had broken through years of heavy clouds. For Amara, it was more than a wedding. It was proof that her sister's cruel words had not defined her future. Friends and relatives congratulated her warmly, some even surprised that the quiet girl they had once overlooked was now preparing to be a bride. Obinna's family embraced her with open arms, treating her with respect and kindness, and for the first time, Amara began to feel what it meant to be truly valued. But Chinwe could not stand it. The news hit her like a blow, and instead of celebrating her sister's joy, she set out to poison it. She began whispering in the neighborhood, spreading rumors with her sharp tongue. "That marriage won't last," she told the women at the market. "Obinna is only marrying her out of pity. Wait and see, their wedding will be a shameful disaster." Some shook their heads at Chinwe's bitterness, but others listened, carrying the gossip further. Soon, Amara heard the cruel words echoing back to her from strangers' lips. At first, the whispers pierced her heart. She lay awake at night wondering if maybe, just maybe, Chinwe was right. The old fears returned, pressing heavily on her chest. But Obinna's steady love reminded her of the truth. Each time doubt tried to creep in, he would hold her hand and say, "Amara, you are the one I choose. Let their words fall away. We are building our own story." His faith in her became her anchor. Instead of breaking under the pressure, Amara began to grow stronger. She threw herself into the wedding preparations with quiet determination. She chose her fabric carefully, bright colors that spoke of joy and renewal. She walked to the tailor with her head held high, ignoring the murmurs she heard along the way. When relatives came to help with the cooking lists and ceremony plans, she welcomed them with warmth, showing them a side of her that was no longer timid but glowing with purpose. Every time Chinwe tried to plant seeds of doubt, Amara answered with action. She learned to silence the lies not with arguments but with resilience. Deep inside, she carried a new kind of fire, the kind that comes when a person has suffered long but refuses to let suffering. She reminded herself daily that walking proudly as a bride was not just about wearing a gown. It was about reclaiming the dignity she had been denied for years. And so, while Chinwe plotted and gossiped, Amara prepared for her wedding with grace. She was no longer the quiet, invisible sister hiding in the shadows. She was a bride-to-be, standing tall, ready to walk into a future that belonged to her. And no rumor, no bitterness, no sister's cruelty could take that away. The wedding day arrived like a dream Amara once thought she would never live. The ceremony was set in Lagos, in a hall alive with color and sound. Bright African fabrics filled the room. Aso ebi in shades of gold and royal blue shimmered under the lights, geli wrapped high on women's heads, men dressed sharply in igbadas. The air carried the rhythm of drums, talking and laughter rising and falling like waves. It was a celebration that seemed to pulse with life itself. When Amara stepped into the hall, all eyes turned. She walked slowly, her gown a blend of tradition and elegance, white lace woven with subtle Ankara pattern. Beads rested against her neck, and her geli sat perfectly, framing a face that glowed with joy. For years, she had been the sister overlooked, the quiet girl mocked at every gathering. But on this day, she was radiant, shining with a confidence that stunned even those who had doubted her. Guests whispered, "Is this the same Amara?" as they admired her grace. At the back of the hall, Chinwe sat stiffly, her lips pressed tight, her eyes burning with anger. Her prophecy had shattered right before her. Amara had become the bride she swore she would never be. Instead of pity, the room was filled with admiration for her sister. The laughter and music that surrounded Amara felt like salt in Chinwe's wound, each cheer a reminder that she had lost the battle she had fought so cruelly. As Amara walked down the aisle toward Obinna, her heart swelled with gratitude. She saw him waiting at the altar, dressed in white and gold, his eyes never leaving her. Every step she took felt like a victory, not just over Chinyu's words, but over the years of doubt she had carried. She thought of the girl who once cried silently in her room, believing no one would ever want her. That girl had survived, and now she was walking proudly into a new life. The ceremony was filled with culture and love. Traditional drummers played as the couple exchanged smiles, elders prayed blessings over them, and the hall erupted in song. Family members sprayed money over the dancing couple, a shower of joy and prosperity. Children clapped their hands and joined in the rhythm, while older women sang ululations that pierced the air with pure celebration. But the brightest moment was not in the music or the dancing, it was in Amara's smile. It was wide, unshaken, full of peace. She had finally claimed her place, not as the shadow of her sister, but as a woman loved, chosen, and celebrated. Chinwe could only watch, her fury hidden behind forced stillness, as the sister she once mocked became the center of a story she could not control. On that day in Lagos, Amara's joy outshone every bitter word ever spoken against her. She was the bride everyone came to honor, and no one, not even Chinwe, could take that away. The hall was filled with warmth and music as Amara and Obinna stood before the officiant, ready to exchange their vows. The air carried a soft stillness now, everyone leaning in to witness the sacred moment. Amara's hands trembled slightly in Obinna's, but her smile was steady, her eyes glowing with a mixture of love and disbelief that this day had finally come. She was moments away from proving to herself, and to the world, that the cruel prophecy spoken over her life was nothing but a lie. But just as the officiant asked the couple to speak their vows, a sound broke through the silence. It wasn't laughter, nor was it a cheer. It was the sound of someone sobbing. All heads turned toward the back of the hall. Chinwe, dressed in a bright gown, was crying uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. The room shifted uncomfortably. Whispers rose like small flame. No one had ever seen the proud, confident Chinwe cry in public. Then, to everyone's shock, she stood. Her voice trembled, but it was loud enough to silence the entire hall. "I cannot keep this inside any longer," she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. "All these years, I destroyed my sister's confidence. I mocked her, I laughed at her, I stole her joy. And I did it because I was jealous. Jealous of her heart, jealous of her kindness, jealous that, even when I shined, people still saw something pure in her." Gasps filled the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Amara stood frozen, her hand gripping Obinna's tighter as if to keep herself steady. Her heart raced, her mind unable to process the sight of her sister breaking so openly. This was the same Chinwe who had always held her head high, who never admitted fault, who prided herself on being untouchable. And now, here she was, confessing her cruelty in front of family, friends, and strangers alike. Chinwe's voice cracked as she continued. "I told her she would never be a bride. I wanted her to believe it because deep inside, I feared the day would come when someone would see what I tried to bury. And now that day is here. Look at her, look at how beautiful she is. And here I stand, consumed by my own bitterness." The hall was silent, every eye flickering between Amara and Chinwe. The drummers had stopped, the singers hushed, even the children fell quiet. For a long moment, Amara couldn't move, her body frozen as waves of old pain mixed with the shock of hearing her sister's confession. Obinna squeezed her hand gently, grounding her in the storm. His eyes told her he was with her, no matter what came next. Amara's chest rose and fell with a heavy breath. She had dreamed of this day as a victory, but never had she imagined it would also become a collapse, a breaking of the very person who once tried so hard to break her. The hall was still heavy with silence after Chinwe's confession. Guests sat frozen in their seats, unsure if the wedding would continue or collapse completely. All eyes turned to Amara, waiting for her response. She stood there, holding Obinna's hand, her heart pounding so loudly she could almost hear it in her ears. Part of her wanted to scream, to remind Chinwe of all the nights she cried alone because of her cruelty. Another part of her wanted to walk away, to ignore her sister completely. But deep inside, a stronger voice rose, the voice that had always guided her, the voice of grace. Amara took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her gown shimmered as she moved, the beads around her neck catching the light. She turned to face her sister, who stood trembling, her once proud shoulders slumped. For the first time, Chinwe looked small, fragile, even broken. "Chinwe," Amara said softly, her voice steady though her hands shook. "Your words nearly killed me. For years, I believed I was worthless because of what you said. I hid my heart, I doubted my worth, I cried in silence. You made me believe I would never stand here today." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The entire hall was so quiet that even her breath could be heard. "But look at me now," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Today proves you were wrong. I am a bride. I am loved. and no amount of cruelty can take that from me." The guests erupted in murmurs, some nodding, some even wiping their eyes. Chinwe lowered her head, her tears spilling freely. Slowly, she walked down the aisle toward Amara, her steps unsteady. When she finally reached her sister, she fell to her knees in front of her, sobbing openly. It was a sight no one in the family had ever imagined. Chinwe, the proud one, humbled before the sister she had mocked for years. "Amara," Chinwe choked out, her voice shaking. "I don't deserve your kindness. I don't deserve to even be here. But please, please forgive me." The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Amara's answer. Amara's eyes softened as she looked down at her sister. She could feel the weight of all the pain, all the years of hurt pressing against her chest. But she also felt the weight of love. The love she had found in Obinna, the love that had carried her through every cruel word. And she knew she couldn't let bitterness poison this day. She reached out and gently touched Chinwe's shoulder. "I forgive you," she said simply, her voice clear. "Not because it was easy, but because I refused to let hatred live in my heart. You tried to bury me with your words, but love lifted me higher. I forgive you, Chinwe, but never forget you were wrong." The guests broke into applause, some even standing to their feet. Chinwe wept harder, bowing her head low. And in that moment, Amara didn't just win her sister's respect. She won back her own power, in front of everyone. The music rose again, louder and brighter than before, filling the hall with joy. Amara stepped into the center with Obinna by her side, her white gown swaying as she moved. She danced with a smile that reached her eyes, her heart light, her spirit free. This was not just a wedding dance, it was a victory dance. Every step she took on the dance floor felt like she was reclaiming the dignity that had been stolen from her for so many years. Guests watched in awe. Some clapped to the beat, others sprayed money over the couple, but many whispered to each other. They didn't whisper about Chinwe anymore. They didn't whisper about the cruel words or the old gossip. Instead, they spoke about Amara's strength. "Look at her," one auntie said, shaking her head in admiration. "She has suffered, but she did not break." Another added, "This girl is a testimony of resilience." Even the children's eyes shone with wonder as they watched her glow. Amara was no longer invisible. She was no longer the quiet sister hiding in the corner. She was the bride everyone celebrated, the woman who had proven that love could heal wounds and courage could silence shame. As the night went on and the music wrapped around her, Amara thought about her journey. She remembered the cruel words, the lonely nights, the tears she never let anyone see. And now, standing in the middle of joy, she realized something powerful. Sometimes, she reflected silently, the people closest to us bury our confidence, but love, faith, and courage can resurrect it. With that thought, she danced even harder, her laughter rising above the drums, her victory shining brighter than any pain left behind.